In today's topic, we'll be talking about the five types of VCs you'll encounter when you're trying to raise capital. Now, when I use the term VC, I mean people who are professional investors who either have their own fund that they deploy capital through, or they're part of a fund which they've raised money from large institutions, pension funds, family offices, and whatnot. So these are professionals who have been hired and who are, in the business of finding startups to invest in. Now, the best type of venture capital I've always come across is the one who was a founder themselves, who did a startup on their own. These guys and women can understand and relate to you as a founder, what you're going through. And what I find is if you actually are lucky enough to get a VC on your company's funding round who actually has startup experience and they've run a startup, built a startup, sold a startup, or even went bankrupt with a startup, you will find that their advice is probably the best you'll get in the business. These are the types of VCs I would highly recommend you try to go with first. And there's a lot of examples of really good VCs like that, from Josh Koppelman at First Round to Andreessen Horowitz at Mark Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz. These guys are what I would call the top type of VCs. A very close second to them are the types of VCs I would call philosophical VCs. Now, these VCs are ones who really operate under a certain thesis or a belief ideology in terms of like what they think their investment strategy should be. One famous VC, for example, will only look at ideas he thinks that, if the company succeeds in 10 years, that they will fundamentally change the landscape of society. And because of that, this VC was, early in investments such as Google, for example. And while other VCs passed on Google because they couldn't understand it, he really saw the big potential and he invested on the long-term potential, and that's how he invests. Another VC, for example, will only invest in marketplaces. He really believes he understands marketplaces really well. He understands the economics of them and how to gauge whether they'll be successful or not. And so he has a philosophy of investing in marketplaces. There's another VC I know who has been very successful and probably as successful as any VC out there, whose entire philosophy is based on going and talking to the CEOs of major companies and asking them what their weaknesses are and what type of technologies would help that weakness. And then he goes and finds companies who are building that technology and invests in them, knowing that he has a ready acquirer waiting down the road once the product matures to a certain scale. Those types of VCs I like also because they look at the long-term picture. They really care about, the long-term potential of the business and want to see that come to fruition. They're not in it for the short term. Now, the third type of VC is what I would call the spreadsheet VC or this banker VC. These are VCs who historically were bankers that became venture capitalists. These VCs really run their business with a spreadsheet. And I'm not a big fan of this type of VC just because I feel like they try to over optimize the spreadsheet and not really think about the business and the human side of doing a startup. And so while these VCs are not the worst types of VCs you could have, they're not the best ones either, obviously. Now, the fourth type of VC is what I would call the follower. This is the VC where they really have decided that they're going to let someone else set the tempo in a company's funding round and say, hey, if this other VC company comes into the year round, I'm going to invest in that round as well too. So these are VCs who are very much like to follow and they don't like to lead rounds. Now, there's nothing wrong with these VCs in general, like because if you have a big funding round that you're trying to raise and one VC can't do the entire deal, it might be good to get one lead VC and five or six smaller VCs involved in the deal. But at the same time, I don't find the value that these VCs bring to the table beyond capital being of significant use. So I think as long as you know how to use them, what capacity and what role, you'll be fine. Now, the worst VC I've always encountered, and I've seen these types of VCs, is what I call the me first VC. And these are ones where they care much more about their own portfolio before they care about the startup's business. And I've seen VCs and I've had horror stories from entrepreneurs, some stories that you probably would know very well, where a VC forced a company to sell quickly, or they forced a company to keep running even though the company had a great acquisition offer, just because the VC cared more about how their returns were looked than they cared about the state of the enterprise or the long-term viability of the business. And these VCs are ones that I think you'll really be able to quickly tell who they are, because if you get a term sheet from them and you start negotiating the term sheet, you'll find that they fight over every single term. They care about every single contingency. They're really, grinding you down tooth and nail to get you kind of to wear down and take the deal that they want. And you have to really ask yourself, is that a deal I want? Because if this VC is this tough right now, imagine how they'll be when you're kind of locked in step with them for the next 5 years of your business life. So these are the VCs I would very much stay away from as the me first VC. So to conclude, there's five types of VCs. The startup founder who turns a VC, they're great to have on your side. The philosophical VC who really cares about the long-term vision or has a certain philosophy that they operate under or a certain marketplace that they have an expertise in. These are VCs I think are great too if your product and technology fits their, thesis. Then the middle of the road VC is that spreadsheet VC who really just kind of looks at the numbers and makes decisions based on numbers versus anything else. They're kind of in the middle of the pack. And then obviously the follower VC, there's a certain place for them, but you have to know what that place is. And then finally, the me first VC, who I believe you should avoid at all costs.